We're going to talk about the tariff updates. So starting with the latest trade war news, we've got 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports going into effect, Canada and the European Union swiftly retaliating, and then Trump threatening to retaliate against their retaliation, including with a whopping 200% tariff on all wines and spirits coming from the EU. But specifically, at the beginning, let's start with those 25% steel and aluminum tariffs, as those are the most sweeping ones yet, and they apply to imports from all US trading partners with no exceptions or exemptions. And notably, many domestic steel and aluminum manufacturers support this move, saying that it's going to protect their industry against foreign competition. But this also, of course, is by and large of economists warning that they will raise the cost for many American businesses, including manufacturers of cars, canned food and drinks, solar panels, and other products. With, of course, those extra costs then likely being passed on to American consumers. And that beyond that cost, the move has royally pissed off our closest allies. For Canada, for instance, is the largest supplier of steel and aluminum to the US, and in response to the Trump tariffs, it's imposing 25% reciprocal tariffs on steel products worth nearly $9 billion and aluminum products worth roughly $2 billion. And that is in addition to various other items, including tools, computers, water heaters, sports equipment, and cast iron products worth around $10 billion. So that brings the total value of newly taxed Canadian imports from the US to almost $21 billion. And notably, that's in addition to 25% counter tariffs already imposed on another $20 billion of US imports put in place in response to other Trump tariffs that he's delayed by a month. Now, with all that, right, Mark Carney, who will soon be sworn in as Canada's next prime minister, he says he's ready to negotiate a renewed trade deal with Trump as long as there is respect for Canadian sovereignty. Something that seemingly Trump so far has not been interested in, as he continually and repeatedly made comments about Canada becoming the 51st state, including just on Tuesday when he was actually threatening to double the steel and aluminum tariffs to 50% for the country. But in any case, we then need to move on to the EU, where I'll start by noting that Trump slapped similar tariffs on European steel and aluminum during his first term in office as well. Right? And what we saw back then was the bloc retaliating with 25% tariffs on some 180 types of products worth more than $3 billion at the time. So then all of that went away under the Biden administration, but now on April 1st, the EU tariffs will reportedly be back in place, including on iconic American products such as Harley-Davidson motorcycles, bourbon, and blue jeans. But then on April 13th, additional taxes being levied against another almost $20 billion in American exports to the bloc, with a list of targeted goods there being dominated by meat, produce, and alcoholic beverages. But I mean, it includes everything from chewing gum to communion wafers, nicotine patches, and even women's negligees. And with all of that, the duties are clearly aiming to hit pressure points in the US economy while minimizing additional damage to Europe. And in fact, we've seen EU officials making clear that the tariffs are aimed at products made in Republican-led states. Now with that, while understandably a number of places are going to run that as the headline, blue states, of course, are also going to be affected as well. I mean, Illinois, for example, they're the #1 US producer of soybeans, which are also on the list. And with that, you have European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen claiming that the response was intended to be strong but proportionate, and that the EU stood ready to engage in a meaningful dialogue. And then adding to that saying tariffs are taxes. They are bad for business and worse for consumers. Nobody needs that on both sides, neither in the European Union nor in the United States. However, with all that, the response that we've seen from Trump has been to suggest counter tariffs, with us seeing him in the Oval Office yesterday repeating his pledge to enact reciprocal tariffs across the board.
So whatever they charge us, we're charging them. The United States of America is going to take back a lot of what was stolen from it by other countries and by, frankly, incompetent U.S. leadership.
And then today, Trump upped the ante, specifically in response to the EU's retaliatory tariffs on one product in particular, 50% on whiskey. With Trump saying, if this tariff is not removed immediately, the US will shortly place a 200% tariff on all wines, champagnes, and alcoholic products coming out of France and other EU-represented countries. With him also claiming the EU is, quote, one of the most hostile and abusive taxing and tariffing authorities in the world, which was formed for the sole purpose of taking advantage of the United States. So it's going to be very interesting to see what all comes from that, especially because the US is actually the world's largest importer of wine and champagne from the EU. So, a 200% tariff could be pretty devastating. And at the same time, though, the American whiskey industry is also set to take a beating. In fact, according to the Distilled Spirits Council of the US, which has spoken out against the tariffs, the EU is the largest export market for American liquor. Not to mention that the backlash to tariffs in Canada has reportedly led to canceled shipment orders and stalled liquor agreements with potential trading partners. With, some places even pulling American-made alcohol off the shelves, which is something the CEO of the company that makes Jack Daniels understandably says is even worse than a tariff. For now, we're gonna have to wait to see how things play out. Do the tariffs stick? Do they get paused? Do they get pulled back? Do the tariffs then result in counter tariffs that result in counter tariffs that result in counter tariffs? Just super fun stuff. Because, I think we'll all agree with each other what we need right now is more uncertainty. uncertainty, especially in regards to everyday people going, am I going to be able to afford shit? Hey, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this clip from the full Philip DeFranco show. And also, a big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring our Clips channel. Turn your passion into profit over at squarespace.com/Phil or use the QR code. Because whether you're launching a business or a lucrative side hustle, your website is your digital business card. It's the only space where you control the story, no algorithms or distractions. And with Squarespace, it's so easy because they got a ton of stunning professional templates with drag and drop editing that makes site design incredibly simple, no coding required. So get started for free at squarespace.com/Phil or scan the QR code on screen and use code Phil for 10% off when ready to launch. Squarespace.com/Phil.